My personal route to parenthood was 8 years ago. We had success first time, which I now know how rare that is. But with my background being in broadcasting and audio being my kind of passion, I then decided to start a podcast. So I created the fertility podcast. That led me to be more of a patient advocate. I was 36 at the time of having fertility treatment. And from my understanding, embryo donation is only possible to another couple if you are 35 or under. And also, it wasn't something that we both felt kind of comfortable with, that idea of another little person of ours running around. But also, we weren't comfortable with the idea of nothing happening to what we had left. So I started doing research and got back in touch with my clinic and was sent some literature which was explaining about embryo donation in terms of for scientific research, which is a lot of paperwork that you're sent because you have to consent. But for me personally, it was something that I deliberated on and actually had therapy for about 18 months before making the decision. I've been brought up Jewish. My faith is a big part of my identity, but I'm not like actively practicing. But for this instance, I was very much attached to trying to do something spiritual and ultimately faith based in terms of the embryos and what happened. And I had a bit of backwards and forwards in conversations about whether there was a prayer that could, for example, be said. Because from the literature that I, by this point, had, the language that's used is it's not the most sympathetic to a patient who has an attachment to their frozen embryos. So there's language used in terms as discarding the embryos or letting them perish. And it was very triggering and emotive for me. There wasn't any specific prayer. There wasn't really anything because it's kind of in I suppose in it from a faith point of view, it's not like a baby loss because it's such an early stage. So it was actually that support group that said to me, have you spoken to your clinic about further support? And that's where the implications and the more head over heart kind of stuff came in terms of what I think about it. To be totally honest, I'm not sure because I feel like I haven't really let myself think about what that could mean, the implications. Like, is that the suggestion that it starts to develop in some way? There is a part of me that thinks, if it's for the greater good, and ultimately we're talking about a 40-year-old science, 40 whatever 3-year-old science that still only has like 23% success rate for people first time. So when you think so much more needs to be understood, that surely it can only be a good thing to enable these amazing embryologists to have access to this material to find out as much as they want, if it means that the next person has a successful cycle. And if they can look at, because I know a lot of it is about implantation failure, and one of the biggest things in an IVF cycle is that that hasn't happened. So when I do allow myself to think about it, I kind of think it can only be for the greater good. But I don't want to come across naive with that. Ultimately there has to be something in place so that from an ethical point of view it's right. And I just think we need to understand the whys and the hows and what happens when we're talking about this in mainstream society, rather than just automatically assuming it's like freaky. And we wouldn't be where we were if this science hadn't been given the opportunity to evolve 40 years ago.